The acquisition due diligence meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I found out I'd been excluded from it at 8:47 a.m. when Amanda Garrison, the CEO's 28-year-old daughter who'd been promoted to VP of Business Operations 6 months ago despite having never worked anywhere except her father's company, sent me a calendar cancellation with the subject line, "Meeting structure has been revised per executive decision." No explanation, no context, just a sudden removal from the most important business meeting in the company's 15-year history 13 minutes before it was supposed to start. I'd been listed as a required attendee for 3 weeks, had prepared comprehensive technical documentation for the buyer's review, and was specifically mentioned in the acquisition agreement as a key person whose continued employment was material to the transaction. But Amanda had decided that my presence wasn't necessary, apparently because having the actual technical expert in the room would make it harder for her to take credit for building technology she'd never touched. I'm Sloan Parker, and I sat at my desk at Fusion Tech Solutions staring at that calendar cancellation while processing the fact that Amanda Garrison had just excluded me from a meeting where a $47 million buyer would be conducting final due diligence on technology I'd spent 8 years building, and that this exclusion probably violated multiple provisions of the acquisition agreement that explicitly required my participation in buyer meetings. I'd been Chief Technology Officer at Fusion for 8 years, 3 months, and 14 days, which meant I designed, implemented, and maintained every piece of software infrastructure that made the company valuable enough for Tech Ventures Capital to offer $47 million to acquire us. I wasn't the executive who negotiated deals or made strategic decisions about company direction. I drove a 10-year-old Mazda CX-5 with 169,000 miles on it and a parking permit from a developer conference I'd attended 2 years ago still stuck to the windshield. I lived in a small house with a garage converted into a home lab full of servers and networking equipment where I tested new technologies, and a kitchen where I mostly made coffee and occasionally assembled meals from whatever ingredients survived in my neglectfully stocked refrigerator. I was technical, essential to everything Fusion sold, and apparently disposable to Amanda, who thought running a tech company meant attending meetings and making PowerPoint presentations rather than understanding the technology that generated revenue. The trouble had started 8 months ago when Robert Garrison, Fusion's founder and CEO, decided that succession planning meant installing his daughter in progressively senior roles regardless of her qualifications or the damage this caused to company operations. Amanda had started at Fusion 3 years ago as a strategy consultant, after getting an MBA from a school that was prestigious if you didn't look too closely at its actual academic standards. Her consultancy consisted mainly of attending meetings, asking questions that revealed she didn't understand what the company actually did, and writing reports with business school buzzwords that said nothing useful. After 18 months of strategy consulting that produced zero measurable value, she was promoted to Director of Strategic Initiatives, a made-up title that gave her authority to attend executive meetings without actually being responsible for any operational outcomes. After another year, she was promoted to VP of Business Operations, with responsibility for overseeing key business functions and ensuring operational excellence, which in practice meant interfering with departments she didn't understand while taking credit for their successes. The Tech Ventures acquisition had been in progress for 4 months. Tech Ventures was a private equity firm that specialized in buying profitable tech companies, optimizing operations, and either holding them for cash flow or reselling them to larger acquirers. The $47 million offer represented a significant exit for Robert and the early investors, and potentially lucrative outcomes for employees who held stock options if the deal closed successfully. The acquisition agreement included several provisions about key persons whose continued employment was material to the transaction. I was listed as a key person along with 2 other senior engineers, because Tech Ventures due diligence had identified that Fusion's technology value was concentrated in a small team rather than distributed across the organization. The agreement specified that key persons must participate in due diligence meetings, that their employment contracts must be retained post-acquisition, and that any departure of key persons prior to closing could trigger purchase price reductions or deal termination. 3 weeks ago, Tech Ventures had sent a detailed request list for final due diligence, including technical architecture reviews, product roadmap discussions, and interviews with key personnel. I'd been preparing documentation and presentations addressing their technical questions. The meeting scheduled for today was supposed to be the final due diligence session before closing, with Tech Ventures' technical team evaluating our architecture and verifying that the key personnel were capable of maintaining and evolving the technology post-acquisition. Amanda had other plans. 2 days ago, she sent an email to Robert and the executive team suggesting that key person designation should be expanded to include business operations leadership to ensure comprehensive knowledge transfer. Translation: she wanted to be designated as a key person to ensure her position and compensation were protected post-acquisition. Yesterday, she'd sent another email proposing that due diligence meetings should be streamlined by having senior leadership present company capabilities rather than involving multiple technical staff members. Translation: she wanted to present to Tech Ventures herself instead of letting the actual engineers explain the technology. This morning's calendar cancellation was the result of Amanda convincing Robert that she could handle the due diligence meeting without the technical staff, probably by arguing that having too many people in the meeting would be overwhelming for the buyers and that she understood the technology well enough to answer questions. She didn't understand the technology. She could barely explain what our products did, let alone the architectural decisions, technical debt, scalability constraints, or development roadmap that Tech Ventures would want to discuss. Around 77% of you think I should just let Amanda fail in that meeting and enjoy watching her crash. Subscribe right now. Because what happens when a CEO's daughter excludes the key person from an acquisition meeting is exactly why contracts have protective clauses and why buyers read those clauses carefully. At 9:15 a.m., I called Marcus Chin, the engagement partner from Tech Ventures who'd been leading their due diligence process. He was the person I'd been working with directly on technical reviews, and he understood what I'd built. "Marcus, this is Sloan Parker from Fusion. I wanted to check in about this morning's meeting. I received a last-minute cancellation from Amanda Garrison but wanted to make sure that doesn't affect any of the due diligence items you needed to cover. I'm actually in the Fusion conference room right now. The meeting started 15 minutes ago. Amanda Garrison is presenting company overview slides. I was expecting to see you here since you're listed as a key person in the acquisition agreement. Is there a reason you're not attending?" I was removed from the meeting by Amanda this morning without explanation. This is the first time I'm hearing that the meeting is proceeding without the technical staff. Long pause. "Sloan, our due diligence checklist specifically requires interviews with key persons identified in the acquisition agreement. You're listed as CTO and primary technical key person. We can't complete due diligence without verifying your technical capabilities and getting your perspective on the architecture and roadmap. I'm available whenever you need me." Amanda apparently decided the meeting should be handled by executive leadership without technical staff participation. That's not going to work. Let me pause this meeting and discuss with my team. I'll call you back. 10 minutes later, Marcus called back. "Sloan, we need you in this meeting now." I explained to Robert Garrison that key person interviews are contractually required for due diligence completion. Amanda initially objected, saying she could answer technical questions, but I made it clear that our technical team needs to speak directly with the engineers who built the platform. "Can you come to the conference room?" I walked to the main conference room where Tech Ventures team was conducting due diligence. Present were Marcus Chen and 3 other Tech Ventures representatives, Robert Garrison, Amanda Garrison who looked distinctly unhappy about my arrival, and our CFO Patricia Wong. Marcus started immediately. "Sloan, thank you for joining. I want to start by reviewing the technical architecture and getting your assessment of current capabilities and development roadmap. Can you walk us through the core platform components?" I spent the next 90 minutes presenting the technical architecture, explaining design decisions, discussing scalability constraints, outlining technical debt we'd accumulated, and providing honest assessment of what would be required to evolve the platform to handle projected growth. This was the kind of detailed technical discussion that Amanda couldn't have participated in meaningfully because she didn't understand the underlying technology. Amanda tried to interject several times with business-focused comments that didn't address the technical questions Marcus was asking. Each time, Marcus politely redirected the conversation back to technical specifics. At 11:30 a.m., Marcus asked a question that had been clearly building throughout the presentation. "Sloan, in your assessment, how dependent is Fusion's technology on your continued involvement? Could the platform be maintained and evolved by a different technical team?" This was the key person evaluation question. I could have lied and said the technology was fully documented and any competent team could maintain it. That would make the acquisition smoother and protect the deal. But I'd spent 8 years building this platform, and I knew exactly how much institutional knowledge was embedded in my head rather than in documentation. The core platform is maintainable by competent engineers. The architecture is sound and the codebase is reasonably well documented. However, there are significant dependencies on institutional knowledge about why certain design decisions were made, where technical debt exists, what workarounds are in place for specific edge cases, and how various components interact in ways that aren't fully documented. A new technical team could maintain the existing platform, but evolving it significantly without institutional knowledge would require substantial ramp-up time and would likely involve repeating mistakes we already learned from. How long would that ramp-up time be? 6 to 12 months for basic maintenance competency. 18 to 24 months for confident evolution of the platform architecture. Longer if the new team doesn't have specific expertise in our technology stack. Marcus looked at his colleagues, then at Robert and Amanda. This is consistent with what we've observed during due diligence. The technology is valuable, but it's highly concentrated in a small team, primarily in Sloan's expertise. This creates key person dependency risk that affects our valuation and post-acquisition planning. Amanda spoke up. We have other capable engineers on the team. Sloan is important but not irreplaceable. Marcus responded carefully. Our technical assessment indicates that Sloan is the primary architect and has been the sole technical decision-maker for most of the platform's development. The other engineers we've interviewed are competent, but they don't have the same depth of architectural knowledge. From a due diligence perspective, losing Sloan before or shortly after acquisition would significantly impact our ability to execute our post-acquisition technology roadmap. Robert tried to smooth things over. Sloan has been essential to building Fusion, and we expect her to continue in a leadership role post-acquisition. Her retention is a priority. Marcus pulled out a copy of the acquisition agreement. The agreement designates Sloan as a key person and requires her continued employment as a material term of the transaction. Section 7.4 specifies that key persons must be offered retention packages including equity and minimum 2-year employment contracts. Has that been finalized with Sloan? Silence. Robert and Amanda exchanged glances. Patricia looked down at her notes. We haven't finalized specific retention terms yet, Robert said carefully. We've been waiting to complete due diligence before negotiating post-acquisition employment arrangements. That's a problem, Marcus said. Our investment committee requires confirmation that key persons have agreed to retention packages before we can finalize the acquisition. Without those agreements, we have to assume key person departure risk, which affects our valuation. He pulled out another document. I have an updated term sheet here that reflects key person dependency concerns. If Sloan and the other key technical personnel commit to 2-year retention with appropriate equity incentives, we maintain the $47 million purchase price. If we can't secure those commitments, we'd need to adjust the price to $38 million to account for increased integration risk and potential need to rebuild technical leadership. $9 million difference based on whether the key persons agreed to stay. Amanda's expression suggested she was doing rapid mental math about how a $9 million valuation reduction would affect her payout from her stock options. Robert was more direct. Marcus, we can finalize retention agreements with Sloan and the technical team quickly. What terms are you looking for? Standard for these transactions: 2-year minimum employment commitment, equity grant equal to 2% of post-acquisition value vesting over the 2 years, retention bonuses paid at 1-year and 2-year milestones, and severance protection if terminated without cause. We need Sloan's agreement in writing before we can proceed to closing. Robert looked at me. Sloan, can we discuss terms this afternoon and get an agreement finalized this week? Before I could respond, Amanda interrupted. We should negotiate retention packages for all key leadership, not just technical staff. Business operations continuity is equally important for post-acquisition success. Marcus responded with the kind of diplomatic bluntness that private equity professionals develop. Amanda, our due diligence identified specific technical dependencies on Sloan and 2 other engineers. We haven't identified similar dependencies on business operations leadership. The retention packages we're requiring are specifically for key persons who possess irreplaceable institutional knowledge that affects our ability to execute post-acquisition plans. Translation: we're paying to keep the people who actually built something, not the CEO's daughter who attended meetings. The due diligence meeting ended at noon. At 2 p.m., I met with Robert, Patricia, and outside legal counsel to discuss retention terms. The offer was substantial: 2-year employment contract at $195,000 annual salary representing a 48% increase from my current $132,000, equity grant of 2% of post-acquisition value worth approximately $940,000 vesting over 2 years, retention. Bonuses of $100,000 at 1 year and $150,000 at 2 years, and severance of 1 year's salary if terminated without cause. Total compensation package over 2 years, approximately $1.9 million including equity value. I had leverage. Tech Ventures had made it clear that without my retention agreement, the deal value dropped by $9 million. I could have negotiated for more. But the offer was fair, protected my interests, and ensured I'd be properly compensated for the institutional knowledge I'd built. I signed the retention agreement on Wednesday. The acquisition closed on Friday with the full $47 million purchase price. Amanda Garrison's role post-acquisition was transitioned within 3 months. Tech Ventures conducted their own operational assessment and determined that her position was redundant with their own operational management team. She received her payout from the acquisition based on her stock options but was not offered a continuing role. 6 months after the acquisition, I was promoted to Senior VP of Technology with expanded responsibilities across Tech Ventures' entire portfolio of acquired companies. My institutional knowledge of Fusion's platform has proven valuable for integrating other acquisitions and sharing best practices. 1 year after the acquisition, I ran into Amanda at a tech industry event. She was working as an independent consultant, helping companies with strategic planning and operational excellence, which meant she was between full-time roles and trying to rebuild a career. Sloan, congratulations on the SVP role. Impressive growth. Thanks. Tech Ventures has been good about recognizing technical expertise and giving engineers authority over technology decisions. I heard the retention package was substantial. It reflected the market value of my institutional knowledge and the dependency risk Tech Ventures identified during due diligence. The acquisition agreement designated me as a key person. Tech Ventures took that seriously. I thought my operational expertise would be equally valued post-acquisition. Tech Ventures valued the people who built irreplaceable things. Your role was business operations. Oversight. That's not irreplaceable institutional knowledge, it's general management that any experienced operator can provide. My role was technical architecture and development of proprietary systems. That's specific knowledge that takes years to build and can't be easily replaced. The lesson isn't about revenge through contract clauses or schadenfreude watching nepotism fail. It's about understanding that acquisition contracts protect key persons for reasons, that buyers evaluate who actually built the value they're purchasing, and that excluding essential people from due diligence meetings doesn't change the fact that contracts require their involvement. Amanda thought excluding me from the meeting would let her control the narrative and take credit for technology she hadn't built. What actually happened was that Tech Ventures read the contract, asked where the key person was, and made it clear that the deal value depended on my retention, not Amanda's participation. Thanks for staying through this story, everyone who understands that contracts have key person clauses for reasons and that buyers distinguish between people who built value and people who attended meetings about value. If this resonated, subscribe and share your experience. Your expertise doesn't disappear because someone excludes you from a meeting. The contracts remember, the buyers verify, and sometimes the key person clause protects you better than any executive authority.